and they said, this guy looks like a motorcycle guy, give him a call. And the rest was history.
They turned wrenches into millions. At its peak, American Chopper was one of the biggest shows on Discovery Channel. Paul Teutul Senior and his crew built custom motorcycles that sold for six figures, landed corporate deals, and made the family brand untouchable. But within a decade, things crumbled. One star filed for bankruptcy with over $1 million in debt. Another got hit with a $258,000 lawsuit. One was fired from the empire he helped build and forced to restart from nothing. This is the story of how the crew that had it all lost it all. Paul Teutul Senior. Paul Senior wasn't just a bike builder. He was a brand. His giant arms folded across his chest, sunglasses on, that booming voice cutting through the shop floor. When American Chopper premiered in 2003, he turned Orange County choppers into a multi-million-dollar empire. Custom bikes for celebrities, licensing deals, merchandise, appearances. The money poured in, and Paul Senior spent it like it always would. But off camera, the empire was already crumbling. By the mid-2000s, the cracks started showing. Paul Senior and Paul Jr. weren't just fighting for TV drama. They were fighting over control, money, and the future of OCC. When Jr. got fired in 2008, the split fractured the business. Ratings started to slip. Corporate clients moved on. The custom bike market that had exploded during the show's peak cooled off fast, and Paul Senior kept spending. Then, in February 2018, right before a show revival was supposed to bring everything back, Paul Senior filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The court documents laid it all out. He had about $1.8 million in assets, but he owed over $1 million to dozens of creditors. The IRS, vendors, contractors. His monthly income had dropped to a fraction of what it used to be, and the debts kept piling up. There were foreclosure threats on his massive New York estate, the same property that had been featured in episodes, the symbol of everything he'd built. He wasn't broke in the sense of being on the streets, but the man who had controlled everything lost control of the money first. Paul Senior had to sell assets to restructure, vehicles, property, pieces of the empire he'd spent years building. The bankruptcy wasn't a total liquidation, but it was a public admission that the reality TV money hadn't lasted, that the lifestyle he'd built during the show's peak couldn't survive once the cameras stopped rolling. And the thing is, Paul Senior had seen this kind of collapse before. He'd built OCC from nothing, survived the early struggles, and turned it into something massive. But success at that level requires different skills than survival. It requires planning, restraint, the ability to see past the next big build or the next TV deal. And when the show's ratings dropped and the corporate clients dried up, Paul Senior didn't have a plan B. He's 76 now, still building bikes. The bankruptcy was resolved by 2020. Debts cleared, assets sold. He moved operations to Florida, even opened a restaurant. Recent estimates put his net worth back around $15 million, a recovery most people never manage after a collapse like that. But the version of OCC that made him famous? That's gone. The headquarters in New York, the massive builds, the endless crew, those days ended when the money did. You can still find him on YouTube, gripping handlebars, talking about builds like the old days never ended. And maybe for him, they haven't. But the bankruptcy filing tells a different story. It says that even when you're making millions, even when the brand looks untouchable, the floor can drop out faster than you think. And Mikey Teutul maybe knows how hard the floor is. Mikey Teutul. Mikey was the youngest, the funny one, the kid who wasn't supposed to be part of the business, but ended up on camera anyway because audiences loved him. He wasn't a fabricator or a designer. He was comic relief, the guy who'd goof off while his dad and brother screamed at each other in the shop. And for a while, that role paid well. Reality TV, money, appearances, a slice of the OCC merchandise machine. But Mikey saw something the rest of them didn't, or maybe he just felt it earlier. Either way, he got out. In the early 2010s, while the show was still airing and the family drama was ramping up, Mikey stepped back. Publicly, the story was about personal struggles, about rehab and recovery. And that was true. but it was also a retreat from a business model that was already starting to crack. The ratings were slipping. The family lawsuits were escalating. Mikey left before the full collapse, and for a while, it looked like the smartest move anyone in the family made. But the collapse still found him. In 2020, Mikey and Paul Senior were sued by a photographer for unauthorized use of images in OCC merchandise and promotional materials. The court ruled against them. The judgment? $258,000. That's not bankruptcy-level money, but it's $250,000 that had to come out of pockets that were already stretched thin. For Paul Senior, it was one more lawsuit in a mountain of legal and financial problems. For Mikey, who'd been out of the business for years, it was a reminder that walking away doesn't always mean you're free. Mikey's net worth today sits around $1.5 to $2 million, depending on the estimate. That's not broke. But it's also not the trajectory anyone expected when American Chopper was at its peak and the Teutul name was worth something. Mikey didn't build a post-show empire. He didn't launch a brand or a business. He focused on recovery, kept a low profile, and stayed off social media for the most part. Some people see that as failure. But maybe Mikey just understood something the rest of them didn't. Maybe he understood that the fame wasn't worth the cost, that the money would run out, that the family fights weren't just TV drama. They were real fractures that would outlast any contract Discovery signed. He walked away before the crash, but the crash still caught up. Just ask Paul Teutul Jr. Paul Teutul Jr. Paul Jr. was the designer, the guy who actually made the bikes people wanted to buy. While his dad ran the business and played the tough guy for the cameras, Jr. was in the back, sketching, fabricating, turning raw metal into something that looked like art. And for a while, that partnership worked. OCC's reputation was built as much on Junior's designs as it was on Senior's brand. Then, in 2008, his father fired him. The split played out on national television. Screaming matches in the shop. Lawyers. Accusations. Paul Jr. wasn't just losing a job. He was losing the business he'd helped build from the ground up. And worse, he was losing the brand. Orange County Choppers was his father's company. Junior had been an employee, not an owner. So, when the relationship fractured, he walked away with his talent and not much else. He tried to start over. Paul Jr. Designs launched as a competitor to OCC, and for a while, Discovery even gave him a spin-off show, American Chopper, Senior versus Junior. But the legal warfare didn't stop. There were non-compete disputes, contract battles, fights over intellectual property, and who owned what designs. Junior had the skills, but he didn't have the infrastructure, the clients, or the financial cushion that OCC had built over years. Starting from scratch is hard enough. Starting from scratch, while your father's lawyers are trying to bury you, is something else. For a few years, it looked like Paul Jr. Designs might not survive. The clients were harder to find. The corporate deals didn't come as easily without the OCC brand behind him. And every dollar he made had to go back into building a business that could compete. There were rumors, which never confirmed that Junior had filed for bankruptcy too. But what we can say for sure is Junior didn't go broke. But he lost something more valuable than money in the short term. He lost momentum. He lost the brand equity that had made OCC a household name. And in a business where reputation is everything, that's almost as bad as losing the cash. Today, Paul Jr. Designs is still running. Junior's built custom bikes for major brands, worked on projects for movies and video games, pivoted into electric bikes when the market shifted. Estimates put his net worth somewhere between $2 million and $10 million, depending on who's counting. That's a recovery. That's survival. But it's also a long way from what it could have been if the family split hadn't burned everything down. The irony is that Junior had the talent the whole time. He just didn't have the business. And in reality TV, talent without the brand doesn't pay the bills. By the time Junior rebuilt, the moment had passed. American Chopper wasn't a cultural phenomenon anymore. Custom bikes weren't the trend they used to be. He'd survived, but the landscape had moved on. He's still building, still designing, still making bikes that look like nothing else on the road. But the version of Paul Jr. that was supposed to take over OCC and turn it into something even bigger, That guy got erased the day his father fired him, and no amount of legal settlements or post-show businesses can bring that trajectory back, especially when the OCC crew are part of this mess. The OCC crew: Vinny DiMartino, Rick Petco, Jason Pohl, Cody Connolly. These were the guys who actually built the bikes, while Paul Senior yelled and Paul Jr. sketched. Vinny was welding. Rick was fabricating. Jason was designing in 3D. They were the backbone of Orange County choppers, the people who turned concepts into motorcycles that sold for 6 figures. And when the show ended, most of them walked away with nothing. That's not an exaggeration. Reality TV doesn't work like scripted TV. There are no residuals, no royalties. You get paid for the time you're on camera, and when the cameras stop, the checks stop. Vinny, Rick, and the rest were employees. They didn't own a piece of OCC. They didn't have equity in the merchandise or the licensing deals. They were skilled labor, and when the business contracted after the show's peak, there wasn't room for all of them anymore. Some of them tried to build their own brands. Vinny started V-Force Customs, then pivoted to DiMartino Motorsports when the custom bike market cooled off. Rick opened RPD & Co., a custom shop in Pennsylvania. Jason freelanced in design and 3D modeling. They were talented enough to survive, but survival isn't the same as success. Without the American chopper spotlight, the clients were harder to find. The corporate deals didn't come, and the reality TV fame that had boosted them for a few years evaporated the moment the show went off the air. Cody Connolly tried to fight back. In 2009, he sued OCC and Paul Senior for breach of contract, unpaid promises, and likeness rights tied to merchandise and a custom bike. He wasn't asking for millions, but he was trying to get what he thought he was owed. It was a labor dispute more than a financial collapse, but it illustrated the same problem the rest of the crew faced. They'd been part of something massive, and they'd gotten almost nothing for it. None of them went bankrupt. None of them ended up in foreclosure or facing IRS liens. But they also didn't get rich. They got a few years of TV exposure, some career momentum, and then the reality TV machine moved on. They were left with their skills and whatever reputation they'd built during the show's run. For some, that was enough to build a stable life. For others, it was just a reminder that fame without ownership is a dead end. The OCC crew's story isn't as dramatic as Paul Senior's bankruptcy or Paul Jr.'s exile. But in some ways, it's more honest, because it shows what reality TV actually does to most people who aren't the stars. It gives them a taste of something bigger, lets them believe for a minute that the money will last, and then pulls the rug out the second the ratings drop. Vinny's still building, Rick's still fabricating, Jason's still designing, but none of them are doing it under the lights. None of them are making the kind of money they thought they'd be making when American Chopper was one of the biggest shows on cable. They built the bikes that made OCC famous. They just never got to own any of it. Here's the thing about reality TV money. It feels permanent when it's coming in. Discovery was paying the Teutul's millions per season. Merchandise was flying off shelves. Corporate clients were lining up to commission custom bikes. The brand was everywhere. And when you're in the middle of that, when the checks keep clearing and the fame keeps building, it's easy to believe it'll never stop. But reality TV has a shelf life. Audiences move on. Trends shift. And when the ratings drop, the money disappears faster than it arrived. There are no residuals, no back-end deals, no royalties from reruns. Once the cameras stop rolling, the income stops. And if you've been living like the money will last forever, you're in trouble. Paul Senior filed for bankruptcy because he couldn't adjust when the money dried up. Paul Jr. survived, but only by rebuilding from scratch and losing years of momentum. Mikey walked away early and still got dragged into a $258,000 lawsuit. And the crew? They were employees who got a few good years and then had to figure out how to keep going without the spotlight. American Chopper wasn't unique. This is the reality TV pattern. A few people at the top make generational wealth if they're smart. Most everyone else gets a paycheck, some exposure, and then nothing. And the ones who think the fame will last forever, they're the ones who end up in bankruptcy court. The real tragedy isn't that the money disappeared. It's that everyone thought it couldn't. Paul Senior thought the brand was untouchable. Paul Jr. thought talent was enough. Mikey thought walking away early would keep him safe. The crew thought being part of something massive meant they'd be taken care of. They were all wrong. Paul Senior is 76 now, still building bikes, still showing up on YouTube like the old days never ended. Paul Jr. runs a smaller operation, still designing, still creating. Mikey keeps a low profile. The crew moved on to other work, other shops, quieter lives. None of them are broke in the traditional sense, but none of them are where they thought they'd be when American Chopper was printing money. The fights were real. So was the money. And so was the collapse. The empire didn't fall because they stopped building bikes. It fell because the cameras stopped rolling, and nobody had a plan for what came next. So, what do you think about the American Chopper empire? Could any of them have acted better? Let us know what you think. And we've got more secrets about your favorite TV stars. Like this video if you don't want to miss any, and subscribe to this channel for more.